Everybody, thanks for joining us here today. I'm Katie Earl, I'm the coordinator of our program, and we're here with Jenny Ferrentino from Wegmans. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. All right, so welcome. Looks like we have a lot of regulars on here, so I'll breeze through housekeeping. We are recording it. I'll try to post it by tomorrow. Wow, 'cause it's Thursday, so I'll do my best for that. And we'll communicate with you through the Q&A panel, so any questions and comments you have for Jenny, feel free to type those right in and send them to me. We'll try to get to as many as we can. We hope you have a lot of questions today. We'll also be putting out a poll, so when Jenny tells me to release that, that'll pop up on your screen. Feel free to participate, and then we'll go from there. So we'll thank our sponsors, which is my Department of Senior Services, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Western New York, Excelsior Orthopedics, and Wegmans for all their support. And if you ever need anything, Senior Services is at 858-8526. Now let's introduce our speaker. Jenny is a registered dietitian nutritionist who graduated from DUville College. She's been excited to share her nutrition knowledge with the employees and customers at Wegmans stores throughout Buffalo and Erie, Pennsylvania ever since. She enjoys learning about new products and sharing how people can incorporate those foods to help them live healthier, better lives. And she's here to talk about milk. Thank you, Jenny. It's all yours.
Yes, thank you. I'll introduce myself and then I'll turn off my camera so that you don't have to look at me and the presentation at the same time. So like Katie said, thank you so much for having me. I'm Jenny Ferrentino, a registered dietitian in the Buffalo Division Nutritionist, and I am incredibly excited to be back with you all this morning to talk about a topic that I think is really interesting, and there's a lot of things that are new and exciting about this area. So we're going to talk a little bit this morning about milk and milk alternatives. So like I said, I'm going to stop my video and we'll go ahead and get started. So some of the things that are in store for today, we're going to talk a little bit about why dairy is important and the nutrients that it provides. You know, we all hear about milk, but let's dive into it a little bit more and understand why it's recommended that we have it. We'll explore some of the reasons why individuals may pick plant-based dairy alternatives. So specifically, we're going to be talking about those alternatives that are plant-based today. There are, of course, other options that are out there from different animal sources as well. I'm not specifically going to touch on those today, but are happy to answer questions about that as if that is something that's an area of interest for you. But we'll talk mostly about our plant-based milk alternatives. Many people do decide to pick plant-based alternatives due to a variety of reasons. So we're going to discuss that, including those myths that are surrounding dairy. So we'll talk about some of the reasons. And one of the reasons is there's a lot of information out there about why milk is, quote, bad for you and you shouldn't have milk. So we're going to dispel some of those milk myths today, and that's where we'll have the little poll. We'll also discuss some considerations that need to be made when cooking and baking with plant milk alternatives. There's a couple of different things to consider, so we'll briefly touch on that. And then I think most importantly, when we're discussing the difference between the two, I think it's important to talk about the nutritional differences between dairy milk and those plant milk alternatives. So we'll spend some time discussing that as well. If you haven't already figured out from the very beginning here, I am a very quick talker, which means that we will go through the slides relatively quickly, hopefully not too quickly. I'll do my best to keep myself in check, but we will, of course, have plenty of time at the end to answer any questions that you may have. So get those questions ready and I'm happy to discuss as much of those as possible. And Katie, can you just confirm that that switched over for you?
It sure did. Looks great.
Perfect. Awesome. So like I said, first and foremost, it's important to talk about why we need to pick dairy and why it's recommended to us. So the 2020 and 2025 dietary guidelines for Americans recommends that we have 3 servings of dairy each day. And that's been the same recommendation from the dietary guidelines for many, many years now. So it's always recommended that we are having, as adults, 3 servings of dairy a day. I do want to note, and this is going to be the overarching difference between one plant milk in particular. So when the dairy recommendation is made, that is made for cow dairy, with the exception of fortified soy beverages, because of the way that soy milk specifically is fortified and made to market, it is considered an alternative to dairy milk to meet those recommendations. Fortified soy products are the only plant alternative that fits that definition. and is considered to be an appropriate substitute to fill that dairy recommendation. So in general today, when I talk about plant-based alternatives, know that fortified soy beverage does kind of fall in a little bit of a gray area between the two. But it is recommended, like I said, that we have 3 servings a day. And when you think about all of the things that dairy can do for us, it really isn't a surprise that we should be including it as a part of our balanced overall pattern of eating. So let's discuss a little bit about what dairy can do for us. I think the biggest thing that we all hear is that dairy products are good for developing and maintaining strong, healthy bones. Science shows that consuming dairy products is linked to improved bone health, and it may reduce the risk of osteoporosis. Intake of dairy products is especially important to bone health during childhood and adolescence, since that's when bone mass is being built. Research also has shown that the intake of low-fat or fat-free dairy products is associated with a decreased risk in cardiovascular disease and diabetes. And if you really want to double down on the heart health potential benefits of low-fat and non-fat dairy, the DASH diet, and DASH stands for the Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, recommends 3 servings of low-fat or fat-free dairy milk as part of their dietary pattern. So really, if you're thinking about heart health and all of that kind of stuff, non-fat and low-fat dairy really fit into that pattern of eating. And dairy products provide us with a number of nutrients that really help us to live that healthier, better life. The nutrients that go back to the factors that we talked about just in the previous slide of what it does for our body and why it's important. So there's countless nutrients that are in dairy products. We could spend a whole hour talking about that, but this is not a Nutrition 101 lecture. I wouldn't enjoy doing it, and you wouldn't enjoy listening to it probably. So let's talk about some of the big 3 that I think are really the most important to consider that are in dairy milk. And the first one is protein. Protein helps to build and maintain many parts of our body. So it's not just our muscles, but it also helps to build cells, bones, organs, and it's an important part of our immune system. So protein is really important for our immune system to function. This last year and a half has been all about the immune system. So protein is really important for us to consume in our diet, and dairy can be a great source of that. In addition to helping us build our muscles, protein intake is important in helping us to maintain our current muscle mass. So if anybody out there is personally involved in strength training routines or exercise, or has somebody in their life that is involved in that, you've probably heard that having protein before and after exercise is really important. Carbohydrates are as well, but protein is really important as well for helping us to maintain our muscle mass. And as we age, we really want to do that as well. Our muscles decrease over time. So having great sources of protein in our diet can help us to maintain that, of course, along with other factors. Protein also provides us energy from calories and can help us to feel fuller after a meal, which may help us eat less overall. So protein really helps promote satiety by slowing down our digestion. And that, like I said, can help us eat less overall. We're less likely to reach for that snack right after a meal if we've had some protein in it and we're feeling nice and full. The next nutrient that is important in dairy products is vitamin B12, which is a nutrient that is found in animal products only. Vitamin B12 is a nutrient that helps our body's nerve system and blood cells stay healthy, and it also helps us to make DNA. It helps to prevent specific types of anemia that can make an individual feel tired and weak. And as we age, our body becomes less efficient in absorbing the vitamin B12 that we consume in our diet due to just the slowing digestion of our body, the decreased amount of hormones that we release just as a natural part of aging. So because we become less efficient in absorbing that B12 from our diet, it's really important that we increase our intake as we age and be mindful about getting really bioavailable nutrient-rich sources of B12 as a way to help decrease our risk of pernicious anemia, which is the kind of anemia that happens with a decreased amount of B12. Next up is calcium. And I think calcium is probably the biggest one that if you were to think about what nutrient comes from dairy products, calcium's that big one, that link to bone health. And calcium is, of course, used for building bones and teeth and maintaining our bone mass, which is important for reducing the risk of bone fractures. Now, 99% of the calcium that's found in our body is found in our bones. The other 1% of calcium in our body is found in our bloodstream, and this calcium is used to move enzymes and hormones around in our body. If we don't have enough calcium in our diet, and then therefore don't have enough in that blood supply, our bodies will take our calcium from our bones and use it to help keep a steady level of calcium in the blood. Our body likes to work within a very specific range of nutrients and temperature and pH, and it will do what it needs to do to remain in that range that it feels comfortable in. And specifically with calcium, if it is feeling low, if we're not getting enough calcium in our diets, our body will find a way to get it. And its way to get it is to take it from our bones. And of course, if it's taking it from our bones, this can result in a weakening and an increased risk of osteoporosis. So it's really important to consume calcium so that our body has what it needs and it doesn't need to take it from somewhere else. Calcium also plays a role in keeping our heart muscles pumping, and it helps to send signals along our nerves, and that can direct muscle contractions. And just like with vitamin B12, our body's ability to absorb calcium decreases over time. So finding quality sources of calcium in our diet is important to help us maintain optimal bone health. In addition to the natural ingredients and vitamins and minerals that are found in dairy products, ingredients isn't the right word, vitamins and minerals that are found in dairy products, dairy is fortified with vitamin D. And vitamin D is a very important nutrient. I think this year, talking about immune health, vitamin D came up a lot in those conversations, but vitamin D does a lot of other things for our body as well. Is most specifically, and the reason it's added to dairy products is because vitamin D aids in the absorption of calcium and helps us to maintain a proper level of calcium in the body. Excuse me. So you can have as much calcium as you want, but if you don't have the vitamin D, our body's not very good at absorbing that calcium. So it's really important to have both of those together, which is why here in the United States, we fortify our dairy products with vitamin D. Of course, our bodies can also make vitamin D when our skin is exposed to sunshine. But living here in Western New York and other parts of the world, our might not be able to make enough due to weather patterns where we live. It is gloomy and dark a lot of the year here. We all know that. It's also really cold. So during part of the year. So we don't get outside and get the sunlight that we might get if you're, say, with my parents in Florida and enjoying that more tropical sunlight. Up here, we have a generally less sun exposure, so we might not be able to get enough for our bodies to really produce enough vitamin D that we need. Additionally, unfortunately, I think this is a little bit of a theme today. As we age, our body is less efficient in synthesizing vitamin D from the sun. So, it's important because we're not maybe necessarily getting enough from that sun to really be sure that we're getting it from the foods that we eat. And not getting enough vitamin D from the sun or food or supplements, a lot of people do choose to take supplements for vitamin D, can lead to thin and weak bones. This could lead to an increased risk of falls and fractures, which we know can have some serious consequences. Like I said, vitamin D is added to all cow's milk, but you should check the label to make sure that vitamin D is added to your milk alternative of choice. In a moment, we will, like I said, go into a little bit more about for the nutritional differences between them. And it's always about reading the label. That's going to be my theme. Vitamin D is one of those nutrients that you just want to be mindful of to make sure that it's added to the product that you're choosing to pick. So I mentioned milk alternatives. Let's talk a little bit more about them. There are a variety of options on the market. I think a lot of us are probably familiar with soy. I've mentioned it already. There's also almond milk and rice milk available on the market. Recently, you've probably heard a little bit more about oat milk or started seeing that around in the stores. It really has a rise in popularity in the last year and a half, and is even so much as becoming an alternative dairy option when you go out for coffee. So you can go to Wegmans coffee shop, Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, and get oat milk added instead of dairy milk. It's becoming quite a popular option out there. But there's other options available as well. I mean, if you think about an item, chances are somebody has tried to make a plant-based alternative to dairy from it. Some of the options include peas, macadamia nuts, coconut, hemp. There's a product in the South towns that does dairy milk alternatives. It's called Elmhurst. They do it from a whole slew of nuts. So there's really a ton of different options out there. And these milks, and I use that term in quotations because obviously it's not milk in the sense of the product standard that a dairy milk is, but for lack of better terms, we'll call it a milk. These milks are made by soaking the main ingredient of choice in water, and then you blend up that water and the product, and you get kind of a slush. You drain off the pulp, and the liquid that's left is that milk. Again, milk in quotes, but that's how it's made. It's just super simple. You can make milk alternatives at home. I know some people who do cashew milk at home. They soak their cashews in water, they blend it up, they strain it out, and voila, homemade cashew milk. So that's an option for you. The reason for choosing milk alternatives can be endless. There's lots of different reasons why people may choose to choose a plant-based alternative versus the dairy option. And that could include things like milk protein allergies, a lactose intolerance. Perhaps somebody follows a special diet like a vegan or vegetarian diet. It might just be down to taste preferences. I love the taste of oat milk. It's not I don't choose exclusively oat milk, but I really like it. So when I go to a coffee shop, I choose it because I like the flavor and the oomph that it gives to coffee. So a taste preference is there. There are, of course, other reasons as well. In my household, we do choose to have a lot of almond milk simply because almond milk has a really long shelf life. If you've ever picked up dairy products, sometimes you get the milk home and you realize you got 3 days to use that gallon of milk. If you got young kids or you got a milk lover in the house, that might not be an issue. My husband and I only use milk products the majority of the time for additives to our coffees in the morning or an occasional cup of cereal. So for us, we don't go through it enough. Almond milk becomes a great alternative because it's got a month and a half on the shelf. So that's really nice as well. So there's, that's an option available. So Katie, we are going to go to the poll portion because there are also several myths out there that are surrounding dairy, and those myths may really influence the reason somebody might switch from dairy to a milk alternative. So what I would love to hear from you guys is if you have heard about any of these myths. So please feel free to click all that apply and submit that answer back. And we'll go through some of those myths, dispel those a little bit. There is because there's lots of other ones out there. And if there's a question that you might have about one of those, maybe we can answer that at the end as well. So I will pause, take a drink, and please feel free to answer the poll.
Perfect. I'll let it go a couple more seconds and then I'll close it, which normally gives about a 20-second delay. So that should be good timing.
Awesome.
All right, I will release the results in a second and they'll pop up on your screen.
Cool. Technology, it's so cool.
Isn't it though? Are you seeing them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
Okay, so it sounds like there is a lot of different, you guys have heard about all of these, at least somebody has heard about all of them. I think the biggest one here is that milks contain antibiotics. So let's take a moment and go through each of the 4 that we have up on the screen there just to try to dispel those. And for the person who put in other, I encourage you to put your other myth in the Q&A box and we can definitely answer that at the end. So thank you for that, Katie. So the first myth that was on that list there is that dairy causes acne. So while many foods, particularly greasy snack foods and chocolate, we were all teenagers once, we remember hearing this, have long held a reputation that they're bad for our skin. The American Academy of Dermatologists indicates that diet is not the sole cause and should not be the sole treatment for acne. So instead, a diet needs to be combined with proven acne-fighting treatments. As for dairy, the evidence of its link to acne is weak. And in fact, research indicates that probiotics, or those friendly bacteria that are found in some fermented dairy products like yogurts, is known to help the digestive tract and in turn may be beneficial for our skin. If you talk to anybody, any dietitian about the gut, your GI system is the source of so many wonderful things in our body. And when we're feeding that well, the rest of our body tends to have some really great benefits as well. And so the research is showing that feeding fermented dairy products is really great for our digestive tract and may also have that benefit from the skin. So no need to cut out pizza, but it's all about combining, our diet and treatment and talking to a dermatologist about what's right for you specifically. But cutting out dairy just because we think it can cause acne is not the treatment, nor is that recommended by the Academy of Dermatologists. Well, the next myth that we sometimes hear is that milk increases mucus production. And I know it's 10:30 in the morning, so hopefully none of you guys are eating breakfast as I talk about mucus, but that is a common misconception. My sister went to school to be an opera singer, and they did not consume dairy while she was in school because of the myth that milk increases mucus production. But research does not support that increase. Research doesn't support the fact that milk increases other cold-related symptoms as well. The reason for that myth is most likely because milk has a creamy texture and that can leave a coating in your mouth and throat. So, there is a creamy texture that comes from milk, especially full fat milks or fermented products. My opera singer sister probably didn't want to have that feeling in her mouth and throat beforehand. But it was a misconception that drinking dairy products caused an increase in mucus. So enough mucus talk. We'll move on to the next myth, which is that we shouldn't drink milk because we're the only mammals that do it. My dad is the biggest one that I hear all the time saying that we don't drink milk because nobody else drinks milk. But the thing is that milk has been an important source of human nutrition for thousands of years and in cultures across the globe. It's not just us here in the US that drink it. There's cultures from around the world that have been including dairy products as part of their diet for centuries. The health benefits of drinking milk have been well documented for decades of research and are backed by the nutrition and science community. So there's a lot of things that we do that other animals don't: drive cars, pay bills, all that good stuff. That is not a sole reason not to consume dairy products. The last myth that I want to cover, at least during the presentation until we get to the questions and answers part, and I think this was the biggest one, was that milk contains antibiotics. So while it is true that sometimes it is necessary to treat cows with antibiotics if they're ill, which is good. We want animals to be well taken care of, and if they're sick, to get the treatment that they need to get better. But the milk that it comes from a cow that is being treated with antibiotics is separated out to ensure that it does not enter the milk supply. Milk is also tested multiple times upon delivery at a plant, and any milk that tests positive cannot be sold to the public and is safely discarded. So any milk product that you are purchasing from a reputable source, a grocery store, a corner store, anything that goes through the market, and I'm saying that because if you buy direct from the farmer, you're trusting the farmer selling you safe product. But if you're buying something that's come through a traditional market, that product has all been tested and is free of any antibiotics. So it's not something that you necessarily need to be concerned about. So enough talking about weird myths about dairy. Let's talk a little bit more about milk alternatives, those plant-based milk alternatives. So if you're switching from dairy, or if you're like me and you want to enjoy dairy alternatives along with your traditional dairy, it can be incredibly hard to choose what alternative is right for you. There are so many options available, and I mentioned a few of them earlier on the screen. You're just looking at different varieties of almond milk. There are so many options available, and there are several reasons why you might pick one option over the other. I think the biggest one, first and foremost, that we have to always consider is the availability when you shop. That's going to be a huge factor. Depending on where you shop, I'm obviously here from Wegmans, and I hope you guys are all joining us at Wegmans. We have a lot of really great options out there, as do other retailers. But let's say you're shopping from a corner store, or you work with some of the groups that I work with in like the downtown city of Buffalo area, and they don't have easy access to a grocery store. The options that are available to you at some smaller places aren't necessarily as big as they are at a bigger place. So what's available to you might just be what you get to choose. I mentioned the milk alternatives at coffee shops. Starbucks is notorious right now for their lack of oat milk. They seem to not be able to get that supply in. So if that's your milk alternative of choice and you go to Starbucks, chances are that's not an option available to you. So availability, short and sweet, is going to be a main factor. I think that determines what alternative that you choose. Of course, if you have an allergy, that's going to play a big role. If you have a tree nut allergy, almond milk is not for you. If you have a soy allergy, obviously you're not going to be choosing fortified soy products. So that's really going to narrow down your choices. And then once you've kind of gone through all of that, you've got some options available to you, taste is going to, I think, be the deciding factor. The taste of milk alternatives is really going to vary based on the source. I think we've all probably had dairy milk out there. We know what it tastes like. It's consistent across the board. But depending on the plant alternative that you choose, the taste is going to vary greatly. The original or the unsweetened options tend to taste a lot like the source. So if you don't like the taste of the original product, if you don't like the taste of oats, you are probably not going to enjoy oat milk. Brands also offer flavored or sweetened options available to their milk alternatives. Pay attention to the label to see if the item that you're choosing is sweetened or flavored, and consider how that product is going to work for you. Sweetened and flavor options may not work in a variety of savory dishes. So as you can see on this slide, even within that category of the almond milk, there are a variety of options available. And you may need to pick a few different options that are going to fit a variety of the needs that you have. So let's talk a little bit about almond milks here. I personally choose the vanilla unsweetened almond milk. I don't want all of the added sugar, but I like the flavor of the vanilla. I think it kind of masks that nutty flavor of almond milk, which I love almonds, but I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the original. So we go with the vanilla unsweetened, which is great for our coffee and our cereal, and if I make a smoothie or whatever it is. But we like a box of mac and cheese every once in a while, and vanilla almond milk, not good at mac and cheese. So when we're having mac and cheese, or if I'm baking with it, making a casserole or whatever it may be, a savory dish, my traditional vanilla unsweetened almond milk is not going to be my choice. So all important things to consider. Of course, there are, like I said, considerations to make when you are cooking and baking. So besides the almond milk example that I just got, there's a couple of other examples that I'd love to share with you guys this morning if that is something that you're considering doing. So let's say you decide to choose soy milk. Soy milk is incredibly rich and works really great, I think, in savory dishes. Some people do find that it has a beanie flavor, soybeans, that bothers them. Others don't notice it. If you're making a nice casserole with cheese and all of that good stuff in it, you probably aren't going to notice it, but that is something to consider. Back to that almond milk, it's not typically used in savory dishes because of the nutty flavor that it has, but it does work really well in desserts and smoothies. And then rice milk is a very popular kind of old school option, and it's naturally sweeter than a lot of the other alternatives, so it works better in baked goods than savory dishes. It is a little bit more watery than other milks, so it doesn't really provide a richness or creaminess. So it's something to just consider if one of those three options are something that you're considering choosing. The last thing that I wanted to talk about regarding milk versus milk alternatives is the nutritional differences. And like I said, there are a variety of reasons that somebody may choose to pick a milk alternative to a dairy product. And things like the taste and its abilities to be used in a culinary purpose are important to think about. I think the biggest thing to consider and to be mindful of when making a change is the nutritional differences. Dairy and milk alternatives really do differ, and it's important to take time to read the nutrition facts panel. Also, sometimes those nutrition facts panels aren't large. They don't have a lot of space on them. They're also only required by law to put so much information on them. So sometimes visiting the website of a specific manufacturer is also important and helpful in determining what nutrients are available in a product that you're choosing. The differences, so let's talk about some of the nutritional differences. So first one I think of, at least for me, it's kind of a factor that goes into play, is the differences in calories between dairy milk and alternatives, specifically something like almond milk, which has like, I think 30 calories. The unsweetened almond milk has like 30 calories per cup. So there's a big calorie difference between the dairy and the milk alternatives. And that may sway somebody who's really looking to decrease their overall caloric intake. And while this caloric intake reduction might be beneficial for some who are looking to be more mindful of their calories due to weight goals, it can be a cause for concern for individuals who struggle to meet their calorie needs, such as those with decreased appetite due to age, illness, or medication. So if you're somebody who struggles to get enough calories in during the day, choosing a lower calorie milk alternative, if that's something that's a part of your regular diet, might not be the way to go. And for this one, I always think about kids too. If you have or are around or have had young kids, especially that toddler age, you struggle to get them to stop to eat anything. And they need a lot of calories to grow and do all of the activities that are important to them. So having things that are calorie and nutrient rich are really important for younger age groups. But of course, as we age, becomes harder sometimes to get the calories that we need. We're just not as hungry. So, consider what your caloric needs are and make that a consideration when you're choosing between dairy and non-dairy alternatives. Another thing to consider is to compare the protein content of dairy milk and milk alternatives, because really only a few varieties of milk alternatives come close to matching the amount of protein that's found in dairy milk. Research suggests that our protein needs, like I said, may slightly, or I think I've mentioned this earlier, that our protein needs increase as we age to help us prevent muscle loss. So it's really important to make sure that we read the label for the protein content of the milk of our choice. Something that I think is really interesting is, we think about nuts, almonds in particular, as being a good source of protein. And traditionally the nut, itself can be a really nice balanced snack of proteins, calories, and fats. So that's nice. But when you make almond milk, remember we talked about how they soak it in water and then they puree it and then they drain it. I believe that the amount of almonds that are in a serving of almond milk is like 5 almonds. So while almonds in general might be a great source of protein, almond milk is not necessarily a great source of protein just in the processing. So it's important to be mindful of how much protein is in the product that you are choosing, because we know it plays an important role in our health. You also want to keep an eye out on the nutrition facts panel for both milk and milk alternatives for added sugar, because in general, we want to limit the amount of added sugar that we have in our diets. And that's because foods with added sugar tend to take the place of other really nutrient-rich foods in our body. Increased consumption of added sugars in our diet can also lead to potential health concerns. So we really want to be mindful of, especially with those sweetened products, how much added sugar is in there. Now, most of those products, including dairy milk, are going to have natural sugars in them. Dairy has lactose in it. That's part of dairy milk. That's not the area of concern. It's when you're adding in additional sugar. Say that chocolate milk that you might enjoy. That traditionally has added sugar in it. So it's just something to be mindful of, considering your overall pattern of eating. Is your dairy choice contributing to your added sugar amount that you're consuming during the day? We mentioned earlier fortification of dairy products with vitamin D. Most milk alternatives are fortified with vitamin A and calcium and vitamin D to bring them closer to dairy milk. But some micronutrients that are found naturally in dairy milk, like magnesium, phosphorus, and potassium, are not included or fortified into milk alternatives. So it's important to read the nutrition facts panel and the ingredients list, perhaps visit the website to ensure that the option you choose is fortified, and consider those nutrients if they are a nutrient of concern for you or you don't have other dietary sources of them in your diet. If dairy products would have been your main source of a specific nutrient, make sure that you're getting it from other sources or that the alternative that you're choosing is fortified. As we age, our needs change for some vitamins and nutrients, so it's important to talk to your healthcare provider to determine your specific needs and find foods that will help you meet them. It is also important to remember that we have a reduced need for calories as we age, so it becomes even more important to pick those nutrient-rich foods first. These nutritional differences are especially important to consider when providing milk alternatives to children. With the exception of unsweetened fortified soy milk, plant-based milk alternatives are not recommended as a substitute for a serving of dairy group to children. If allergies are a concern, parents should consult an allergist and a registered dietitian nutritionist about which milk substitutes are best to fit their child's needs. So we talked a lot about differences and taste profiles and all the different reasons that you might pick one dairy product or milk alternative product over the other. So I think the question we're all asking for, dietitian, which one is right for me? Well, whichever one you prefer. I mean, truthfully, I'm not here to say you must drink dairy milk or you must drink milk alternatives. It's whichever one you want to drink. Include your beverage of choice as part of a balanced pattern of eating. I think that's key. We can't look to one food to provide us all the nutrients that we need. So it's all about including the choice that we want to make as part of a balanced overall healthy pattern of eating. Just remember to read the nutrition facts panel and become aware of any nutrient deficiencies or changes that might be there based on your choice. Find balance from other foods first, preferably, or supplements if that's your needed source of nutrients as appropriate. I want to thank you all this morning for taking some time and listening about milk and milk alternatives. If you have any questions, we have time for questions and answers. Happy to answer that. But my email address is up on the screen, jenniferferrentino@wegmans.com. I welcome any questions that you may have. You could also email Katie. She knows how to get a hold of me if you have any questions, and happy to answer any of those that you may have. So I will end the slide and put my video back on. I talk myself through these things because I don't know, it just seems to help make things easier.
Totally fine. Validates what you're doing. Thank you, Jenny.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Gosh, so we do have quite a few questions here.
Okay.
All right, so let you take some water. This first one is, can you become lactose intolerant later in life?
Yes, you can. Unfortunately, as we age, our body changes the way that we're able to process a lot of food. So lactose intolerance and gluten intolerance, those things can all happen as we age. So that's not uncommon. If you have a concern that specific foods aren't working well for you, I would recommend consulting with your doctor before making any major changes in your diet to find out if in fact you have an allergy or an intolerance, but making those changes because yeah, unfortunately, as we age, those things can happen.
All right, thank you. Let's see, this one is, can you explain why vitamin D is often prescribed for children? Is it calorie related?
It's not calorie related. Vitamin D is often prescribed again because of perhaps they're not getting enough from the sun, but vitamin D is such an important nutrient as we grow. Back in the day, people used to get rickets from vitamin D deficiency. So we fortify vitamin D in things like milk and cereal because we don't want our kids to have that. It's abnormal bone growth that can lead to bowed legs and stuff like that. We've greatly reduced that in this country because of that fortification. But oftentimes, especially if you have a pickier eater, a supplement might be necessary for a kid. And
All
for
right,
adults.
thanks then.
Yeah.
Let's see, is there a connection of soy milk and breast cancer?
So that is definitely a common thing that has been thought about and said. All the research that I have read has suggested that the hormone that is of concern with soy products is not directly linked to cancer. However, if you have cancer caused by specific hormones or hereditary things, it may be a choice between you and your doctor to avoid soy products in your specific diet. But for a general population, avoidance of soy products is not recommended.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mhm.
We have a comment. We also like almond milk for the long shelf life.
Yes, absolutely. It's the way to go. The day that I realized that, I was like, why have I not switched sooner?
I agree. Instead of chugging milk so you don't waste it. Yeah.
Yes.
This next question is, if you have whole milk and add water to it 50-50, are you creating 2% milk?
No, you are not, but you are definitely thinning it out. So maybe if you, instead of drinking a whole cup of half of whole milk, you drink a half a cup of whole milk with the cup of water. So you're like, getting the same quantity, but less of the milk. That serving is less fat, but the milk itself is still processed the same. So calorically, you're consuming less, um, but it's not the same as the way that they process milk to reduce the fat content.
Aha, thank you. We have a comment. The myth section was so interesting. As a dairy lover, all those facts were enlightening and a relief, I might add.
Good, I'm glad to hear it.
Yes. This next is, can you talk about, oh, sorry, something popped up here for me. Can you talk about the special probiotic yogurts? Are they better?
So yogurts do have many brands of yogurts add probiotics to them. I know Wegmans brand, we add probiotics to ours as well. Better in the sense of like nutritionally better. No, a yogurt is a yogurt. They'll vary based on the amount of added sugar, depending on flavorings and stuff like that. The great thing about having probiotics, though, added to fermented foods like yogurt is all the great benefits that it provides for our body. When we consume probiotics, it increases the amount of good gut bacteria that we have, and increasing that aids in digestion, helps in our immune health, helps in our emotional health. Serotonin is produced in our gut. So there's a lot of great benefits to consuming probiotic rich foods.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Let's see. Is it better to make or to buy pre-made chocolate milk or to make it at home by myself,
I would
sugar-wise?
sugar wise, so I mean, unless I'm looking at a thing of Nesquik, I don't know specifically. I mean, I'm happy to do a quick little Google search along with y'all. We could definitely do that. I would just say you got to compare the difference between the added sugar in the mix that you're choosing and a pre-made chocolate milk alternative, and just compare the two labels between the two. It also depends on what you taste, what you prefer. I know people who only want to drink the white milk with the chocolate powder added to it or syrup. I can't stand the taste. If I'm going chocolate milk, I want somebody to make it for me first. So compare the ingredient list between like a Nesquik or a flavoring syrup and the traditional, and just see where the differences lie.
Thank you, Jenny. I know I
Mhm.
have a heavy hand with the chocolate syrup bottles, so I don't know what would be better.
Fair.
All right, this person's wondering, are nutrients included in fortified foods better absorbed by the body than by taking supplements?
So it depends on the source of the nutrient that they're adding. So vitamin D is absorbed differently depending on what form of vitamin D is added to a product. So you would need to read the nutrition label to find out what kind of vitamin D is added to a fortified product or to a supplement specifically, and kind of do a deep dive into how your body absorbs that. I know like vitamin D supplements that are out there, like full disclosure on myself, I'm taking a prenatal vitamin. Some of them have vitamins that are more readily absorbed than other ones. And it's just comparing the labels. There is a website that you can go to that will talk about the difference in supplements as to how well they're absorbed in our body. And now that I've said that, I'm like, which website is that? So let me see if I can find that for you really quick. But you really just want to take the time to compare the nutrients between them and see if how they are absorbed in our body, but that varies.
Sounds good. We'll let you find that. Thank you.
Yeah. That might take a second. So if you want to ask a question.
I didn't know if you want to do two things at once. All right.
Oh,
For
no, I found it.
okay.
It's called Labdoor, Labdoor. And it's labdoor.com. You can sign up for a free account and you can literally put in almost any vitamin or supplement that you have, and it gives a rating based on testing. The important thing to think about with supplements is that they're not regulated like food is. So it's hard to know that the supplement that you're purchasing has what it says on the label, but resources like labdoor.com are a great resource to kind of, they do testing, independent testing on products to kind of give a thought on that.
Oh, thank you. That's really great to know.
Yeah.
So I'm just seeing one more question here. So if you have anything else you're wondering, folks, type it in before we end. This question is, what is the difference between regular yogurt and Greek yogurt?
Greek yogurt is strained. And so it's typically a lot thicker because a lot more of that water is removed. And because it is a more concentrated product, the amount in a cup of Greek yogurt of specific nutrients like protein is going to be a lot higher because you're getting a more concentrated amount in a cup versus a traditional yogurt. Greek yogurt is nice because of that increased protein content. Not a lot of people, some people don't necessarily enjoy the texture of Greek yogurt. There are a lot of though other strained yogurts that are out there, specifically from like Scandinavian countries. They're kind of like Skyr is one of them, SKYR, which is a strained yogurt as well. It's just got a slightly different texture than Greek yogurt. But those are nice because of that reduced water content. It's more nutrient dense.
Wow, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
This whole time I was wondering that too. A question just came in. What is kefir?
So kefir is a fermented yogurt beverage. Sometimes I say kefir, sometimes people say kefir. It is popular in like Middle Eastern cultures, I believe is where we got that from. But it is a yogurt beverage and it's, like I said, a fermented product. So it's great for anybody looking to increase the amount of probiotics in it. There's lots of really great flavors out there. Always be mindful of the added sugar in it. But it's a nice option.
Okay, thank you for that, Jenny.
Yeah.
We'll just give it a second to see if anything else comes in here while we're doing that. Oh, let's see. Do you have a source list available for the science regarding the myths? Almost hate to ask that, but just in case I thought I might.
Sure. So I got that from a couple of places, and I can send Katie the sources that I got it from. But the Dairy Council, there's also a scientific study from a researcher from a university that I went to a course with that he provided a lot of that information. I don't know that I'll necessarily bore you with that, but a lot of that information is just found online.
Great. If you wouldn't mind sending me those links if you have the time, I can push those out in an email.
Yeah. Writing
That's
notes.
wonderful. People want to know. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just give it another second here before we close. Is there anything else you'd want us to know about milk or milk alternatives, Jenny, while we're waiting?
Well, I think really quickly too, just on the myths topic, knowing where you find your resources from, I think is really important. So absolutely, yes. Am I saying that I found the myth buster information from the Dairy Council? Yes, I am. Is dairy regulated product so they can't make a claim that there is no antibiotics in it if in fact that there are? Absolutely, that's a thing. They can't have antibiotics in them by law. That's not the Dairy Council saying it and stuff like that. So know that the source of the information that you're getting that from is really important. You can Google why is milk bad for me and find a lot of vegan animal rights groups that are going to tell you that you shouldn't have it. Understand the motive behind the resource and the information that you're receiving. I don't think that there's anything right or wrong with choosing a vegan diet or choosing animal rights, whatever that may be for you, but understand that claims may be made that aren't necessarily substantiated.
I think that's important to know. What's the motivation behind the information? Thank you, Jenny.
Yes.
Last question here that I'm seeing. Can you comment on A2 milk? Just learned about it. It's very interesting.
Yeah. So I think we've all probably heard about lactose intolerance and are very familiar with the fact that some people may not be able to process lactose, which is the natural sugar in dairy. It can cause a lot of GI side effects that are negative for some individuals. So there's a lactose intolerance and an intolerance, if you want to deal with the side effects and eat a bowl of ice cream, some people choose to do that. A milk protein allergy is quite different. So just like with other food allergies, it can lead to very devastating side effects: anaphylaxis, hives, swelling, death. An allergy is not something to mess around with. And there are individuals who do have an allergy to milk protein, so the protein specifically found in milk. Most people have an allergy to A1 milk protein and can tolerate A2 milk protein. Both are found in traditional dairy milk. For individuals who can tolerate A2 milk protein, they may choose to have A2 milk. There's a brand called A2 milk that is specifically created and only has that A2 protein. So it may be considered safe for somebody who has a milk allergy. Goat milk is A2 milk, not A1 milk. So somebody may choose to choose goat milk as their dairy alternative. But if you have a milk protein, it's important to find out if you're allergic to both or just the one before you make the switch. Because it's not, some upset stomach. It's a very severe reaction. So.
Wow, thank you for the education. That was really wonderful. All right, I'm not seeing anything else come in,
Okay.
so I think we got all our questions answered. Thank you, Jenny.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katie, and thank you everybody for hopping on this morning. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. And Jenny, if you have time for a quick debrief, we'll do that really fast.
Absolutely. I'll hang on the line.